This is Fathering Forerunners, Fathers, and Foundations on January 3rd, 2020. And we're just starting out here. I'd asked for testimonies, and Jill gave a testimony of a sense of increasing, well, a sense of increase, I guess, is what it is, sense of the Lord's presence, and then a sense of releasing. So, Jill, how do you go about releasing?
Really, what I do is it's just the intent in my heart and the desire to do so. And often I'll feel it. It either seems to release out of like my belly, my hand, or my heart. It just depends, on what's going on. So.
And could you give some examples of things that you have released recently that can make this a little more concrete for us? Yes,
like as small as it is, I release the kingdom, the restorative power of the Lord in plants that I have, or the wildlife in my yard, and I'm seeing an abundance of blossoms on plants that have never bloomed before. I mean, an abundance of blossoms. And, I have wild, birds galore just coming to visit my yard. And my real love is for restoring creation, plants and animals, things like that. And my cats are in divine health. I mean, I'll lay my hands on my cat just to love on him, and I feel that the presence of the Lord come over me and something being released out of my hands. So it's just things like that.
Awesome. I woke up this morning with revelation, and I spent some time previous, and then when I came to actually starting this meeting session, let's call it, rather than meeting, because it's not a meeting in the sense of the old. I didn't know where this was going to go to today. So I think you've just framed it up. Anybody else have a testimony of practical experience of any kind along the lines of what Jill's talking about with respect to any of your places that you are in heavenly realms, or any part of your life? I just want to hear what you're doing with all the revelation that we're getting. Where does it meet the road? Let me just do a little bit on this. My sense is that there's two, let's call them thresholds or frontiers. The first frontier, I could picture it like an expanding universe, so like a sphere, is the area where we're discovering where we're seeing the new revelation for the first time. That's way, way out there at the edge of our personal universe, if you want to call it that. And then there's another frontier, so that's way up ahead of us. We can see it, but we haven't gotten there yet. And then behind us, there's places that we've actually seen quite a while ago. And these are places that we are actually functioning in, where we're actually living, dwelling, and functioning in the identity that we saw probably months ago. We saw it at the frontier of revelation, up where we're seeing, but now we've done the journey and we're actually living there, dwelling there, functioning there, ruling there. If you see what I'm saying, there's these two frontiers, the one of up ahead of seeing, and the one that's actually where we are long past just seeing it, but we're actually functioning it. We've become it, and it's flowing through us, and it's changing the areas around us, not necessarily just in your physical environment, but if you see the difference. And today, I think I'd like to concentrate on the threshold, the one where you're being and that you're functioning and you're doing. and talk about that today as an encouragement. Jill, thank you for starting this rolling in the right direction, and that's a tremendous encouragement. And it's a faith builder when you see that stuff happening.
It is.
Gives you faith for the other stuff that you're just seeing for the first time, that at some point you're going to actually function in that too. Does the two frontiers make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So anybody else with a testimony? I don't care how far back you feel like it is, or how low you might feel it is compared to how high you've been seeing. Don't let that get to you. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so I'll just share where I'm at. So, and at the start of a new year, this is a good time to do this. Towards the end of last year, one of the things I was working on was trying to operate from heavenly realms, to not just go in and come back, but to go in and have some piece of me stay in. And so as I've been doing that, I do feel His presence moving in me. But the message I've been getting, and that this is my next steps on my personal journey, is that I'm half clean. And I've done so much work with gateway cleanses and looking back into my ancestry, using my seer's gifting and all that I've developed in it to cleanse. And I'm about to do another step through. I'm starting all over again with the gateway of first love. I'm going to step through each and every one of them and just do this whole other round of cleansing and see what happens next. Something that I know Jane Johnson had put online recently was this revelation that, there's a lot more of God to be released, but we're not necessarily vessels that can receive it yet. And I had seen something like that myself recently with, basically, I'm in a dream, I'm asking someone at a bar for a glass of water, saying, I don't drink alcohol. I really devoted myself to cleansing some years back. But and so he said, man, we're going to do more than just the water. We've got all this great stuff to put in the water, olive oil and olives, which is all symbolic of spirit, of course. But the cup I have to drink from is a plastic cup that's cracked down the middle. So I can receive some of this, but it's not nearly what God has to give. And so I could offer that word of encouragement to everyone, because I saw Jane post about it recently too, is that God has more for all of us. And now for this next year, my real goal is to try and get to a point where we can receive more of it.
That's awesome, Eric. Thank you for the vulnerability there too. What I've been seeing is that all of this is a journey. And let's just take overcoming for an example. I am an overcomer as soon as I see myself as an overcomer, just like I'm righteous as soon as I see myself as righteous. But then there's a journey into overcoming. And I find it so easy to look up ahead at the things that I haven't yet overcome and start feeling like I'm not an overcomer, and forgetting all the stuff behind on my journey that I have overcome, because these few things that are right in my face right at the moment don't make me feel like much of an overcomer, because I haven't overcome that thing yet fully. Especially, I've seen. I'm very, very confident in overcoming in my kingship. There's things that I've overcome in my kingship that are really, really big things. But then, and I've overcome with reference to health in my lordship. I've shared that testimony of the 10 or more prescription drugs that I'm not on any longer. In fact, I'm not on any at all. But that does not mean, and I shared that testimony, and then I realized, okay, I'm wearing a prescription on my face. So I do have one more prescription to get rid of here. And so what I'm saying is that doesn't mean that I have absolutely perfect and complete perfect health at this point, but I'm journeying towards it. And there's a big list of victories behind me, but there's still a few aches and pains and things that are on the list, and I'd love to get these glasses off my face. Actually, I've got two sets of glasses. I've got computer glasses and other ones, regular ones. So there's two prescriptions to get rid of. But does that mean I have not, you see what I'm saying? I am so concentrated on the things that are up ahead still to overcome that sometimes I get to the place where I feel like I'm not an overcomer, or I could, and then at that point, stuff is over me again rather than me being over it. You can actually fall into a day of stepping away from all this and pigging out on TV and eating whatever, or something. You can spiral out for a little bit. And this is reality, and this is real honest testimony that yes, I am an overcomer, but I've still got a few things to work on. Similar thing to what you were saying, Eric.
Well, and there's some revelation I had is that we kind of grow in stages. And, as we're on this pathway and seeking the path of life, supernatural health and immortality and things of that nature, there's this aspect of living out of what we have now. And right now what's available to us right now is living out of health and, not getting sick. And it's been interesting on my journey. I find that, when I get to a place where my frequency is real low, I'm feeling really down, I can get sick. And I had issues with that. As you guys may know, I've worked on some wrongful death cases. You spend a week looking at and writing about mass murder in court, I was feeling really down. And then when we did that trial in September, and we still don't have the results, but when we did that trial, I took a different approach, and I really prayed a lot of protection over myself, and it worked. I said, I'm going to have to, in fact, and I was the one who drew the short straw and got to go to the police station and get all the crime scene photos, and I needed a lot of protection to go through that stuff. It was grisly. But I asked God to go ahead and protect my spirit from all the things I was going to have to do. And he did. And it didn't, it is heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, but it wasn't able to bring my frequency down this time. And I don't know that I had a really great technique for it. I just went and asked. And, did a courtroom procedure. I'm going to have to do these things, and I need help. And, and that was granted. So to the extent, because, I noticed that, I'm wearing glasses too these days. And I'm not walking in the fullness of immortality yet. As I said before, I'm only half clean. But, I think there is a step where we're at now where we do have a lot of benefits. And now I'm looking to take that next step on the journey. So I think we really have overcome, and now there's more things ahead.
I agree. By the way, my first experience of a healing meeting, way back when I was still in the church, was in a healing meeting, and I had a vision of myself without my glasses, and that I have that. I still have that as a promise. This is 29, 30 years ago. I still have that as a promise. You think about the glasses thing. I've been wearing them since like 5th grade or something. And I've been heard to say that I prefer to have glasses rather than not because it keeps the ice and the snow and stuff out of my eyes. I've spent a whole lot of my life with glasses protecting my eyes from stuff that gets in your eyes if you don't wear glasses. So I guess that's a really a long-term project. It's very interesting. It was the first element of healing that he gave me a vision of, and yet it's not anywhere near the first one that I experienced. But I've got confidence because I did have that vision that I'm going to at some point get through to the place of having no glasses on my face because I saw myself that way 30 years ago. a bit of a journey involved and a lot of other healing along the way, but this is the reality of a journey. It's got some ups and some downs, and it's got some smaller victories and bigger victories, and maybe some really big victories at the end. And when you get knocked out of your place of peace, you come back up to your place of peace, and you eventually see the pattern about how that all happened. And the next time it happens, it doesn't take you near as long to correct it. And eventually, like you were saying, Eric, eventually, because you gave testimony of this in some areas that had given you problem previously, that eventually you beat that thing, you overcome it. And it doesn't knock you out of there anymore. The situation that knocked you out in the past, you get to a place where it doesn't knock you out of your peace. I have peace almost all the time now. But I spent a day yesterday that I was a little less peace than than I've had over the last several weeks until I woke up to where I was and what had happened. Oh, that's what's going on. Okay. It's like the frog boiling in I remember you heard the story of the frog. You put him in water and you heat the water up. The frog will actually stay in the pot and boil to death because he can't feel the difference as it gets hotter and hotter and hotter until it's so hot that it kills him. Anyway, let me just make a note to Moto G Plus. We do have sound, so Moto G Plus. Anybody else having trouble with sound?
No.
I don't think so. Okay.
No,
Anybody else have a testimony?
I would say mine's probably in the area of the dynamic that we've come out of the old wineskin. And I've climbed that mountain several times. You know, when we did the old fivefold, everyone became their gifting and operated in their gifting. So we went to the top of that mountain. And then when we found how we could, explore and ascend and go into this, some of the top people came out and they sort of gathered their followers. And there's been quite a few of those groups going around. And I really honor those forerunners, those people that stepped out, because they've been doing it for years. Some of those people, 10s and 20 years on their own, silently, quietly. But to follow them isn't the way to do it. You can't listen to somebody that says says something that says something and believe that. We have to go straight and get it for ourselves. So my overcoming journey has been that. And now that this new wineskin, and especially here with this freedom at OUV, we can follow what the Lord has for us, stay in His will without being under, I don't want to call it a controlling spirit or an authority, but just following what God has for us, without getting off track. And
That's wonderful. Thank you. There is that balance between personal journey and corporate journey. We do take elements of our corporate journey and bring it back into our personal journey, but it always comes down to personal journey. What's happening in the corporate group doesn't really impact any one of us personally unless we make it a personal journey. And then the flip side of that, the personal journey comes back into the corporate group, just like people have been testifying today, for others to be able to use as a door, a window to see through or a door to go through. Yeah, and then there still is a in the universal ecclesia, there's still various groups out there at various levels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Bill. This is Sonia.
Yes, Sonia.
Okay, it's interesting that you should be talking about this because During my sleep last night, I had a dream of a woman coming to me wanting to change my medication around. And I thought that was really odd because she definitely wasn't out of the normal of what I've seen as far as doctors. And I say to myself, I've been really concentrating actually on my spirit man.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of things happening as far as stepping into who I really am and who I'm becoming, as far as how God sees me.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I think, because that has always been an area for 30 years that I've tried to, conquer, I would say. I know my mother, who was a forerunner, had mentioned to me that I would be healed one day of it. And so I just step into that and God's timing of it.
Wonderful, Sonia. I'm realizing my overall desire was, with reference to healing, was to get off prescription medication.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And the ones that didn't involve prescription, some of those I still have to fully overcome as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really wanted to get off the prescription medication.
I'll share that I've had ear infections and sinus infections all my life. And then after we started doing Ascensions, that was the last year I ever got them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and when I get down in my frequency, I am able to, have some congestion, something kind of similar to cold symptoms, but without having an actual cold.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been for me a really remarkable change. And I know I have a lot further to go. I'm trying to fix my diet and do other things, but there have been very real and tangible results.
Mm.
I mean, I'm actually missing an organ, so I don't know how that would apply. You know what I'm saying? I'm on the medication because I don't have it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So therefore,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that somehow there'll be an exchange of some sort.
Yeah.
The Lord.
I should clarify, Sonia, I'm not against prescription medication,
Oh, yeah.
because prescription medication keeps us going until healing manifests.
Mm-hmm.
And
There
that's
you go.
exactly what you're doing right now with your prescription medication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very thankful for the prescription. I don't know. I don't know how well I would have functioned without it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just that for me, it's not the highest blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very thankful for it in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I didn't want to fall to this. I feel, that they say we've got an app for that. I felt like the doctors are just like, all they've got is, I've got a pill for that.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
And then I've got a pill to fix what the pill did to you while it was doing the good stuff. Anyway, okay.
I have something to add to that too. I didn't think about it until you were all talking about it, but I too was on a lot of different medications for this or that. And, over the course of 2 years, I've really cut way, way back on, I've dropped out these medications out of my, daily regime. And so, that's just another form of healing. You know what I'm saying? We don't need it anymore, and so we can drop it. So sometimes they cut, those things drop off one by one by one. Feels like it's slowly, but it's still happening. And so I'm glad you guys brought it up.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's take this and move a little bit towards any other testimonies besides physical health. Let's ask the question this way: how are you ruling? How are you functioning as a um, what is in any area having to do with doing, because what I'm trying to do here is seeing is one thing and doing is a different place on the journey. And it always is, all the seeing is meant to bring us to a place of doing. All the seeing of identity gives us identity that includes the ability to function or do. And there is a, because we've had such a strong emphasis on discovery and seeing, we can become unbalanced and emphasize the seeing over the doing. And I've spent time recently in the revelation of Jesus Christ at the great white throne. Nobody's going to ask, I'm not expecting to go there after death. Let's put that out front. I see the great white throne as a place we go to voluntarily be judged with respect to our works. And it actually is something that empowers us to be able to overcome. I see that as the function of that throne. But the thing I'm getting at is, were you to end up at the great white throne, the question is never going to be, what did you see? It's going to be, what did you do, and is your name in the book of life? And your name is in the book of life because you overcame. It actually, the way I see it is, your name gets in there when you come out of Babylon, and it stays in there because you continued to overcome and didn't go backwards. Because there is scripture in the revelation of Jesus Christ about, I will not blot your name out of the book of life. So there is a possibility of getting your name in there because you came out of Babylon, and there's a possibility of having it blotted out once you've gotten it in there. But I'm looking at the 7 letters of Revelation, and Jesus, with every letter, one of the first things he says is, I know your works. And then he goes on to, in some cases, to say, this great job, ecclesia. He's talking to a citywide ecclesia in a whole city. Great job, ecclesia. He's got nothing to reprimand him for at all. In other cases, he says, you're just about ready to lose your candlestick. Get your act together. You really need to do some repenting here. And in other cases, he says, some of you will overcome. I see some of you are in the process of overcoming. But in every case, it's, I know your works. And the great white throne is about works and your name in the book of life or not. Just to finish that whole process off, I see the lake of fire as a place of purification. I don't see it as a place of eternal death and separation. I see it as a place of purification. But what I see the great white throne functioning in is that we voluntarily go there so that we don't involuntarily go there at death. And we voluntarily face the fire instead of involuntarily facing it after being judged at the great white throne after death. Everybody here on this call has said yes to the fire long ago and is continuing to say yes to the fire on a regular basis. You are always refusing to turn around and go back. You're always going forward. The whole process of overcoming is a journey, and it's saying yes and saying yes and saying yes and continuing to say yes. And if you have a moment of stepping back, you turn around and go back to saying yes. That's why you are where you are, is because you've been doing that. But what I'm getting at is the real rubber meets the road is in the doing. And we've been taught that works is something we're not supposed to do in order to get saved. And there's a whole part of the ecclesia that's actually sitting around doing nothing because they think that working is something they shouldn't be doing. And yet we all know, Paul says in Thessalonians, if they're not working, don't feed them. So not working really is a problem. and the Godhead certainly hasn't stopped working. And Jesus said, "My Father's working, and I'm working now." He kept on doing the works of salvation. It was the works of creation he didn't do on the seventh day. Um, Otherwise, he was doing those too. Okay. Anyway, so tell us, share please, about places that you're functioning. Go ahead, Eric.
All right. I love this topic because this is one of the things that I had early revelation on when I first started practicing singing, just using John Paul Jackson material before I ever even heard of Ian Clayton. And from Matthew 5:19, whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And I really like how Mike Parsons talks about it as this dual pathway of relationship and responsibility. And that as you grow in relationship, you also have to step up in responsibility. And I have a website that I kind of put down my learnings on in real summary fashion. Has been my way of trying to step out and at least share, contribute to the body of knowledge. I recently published a book with my own personal journey, Children in the Woods, which is on Amazon. And stuff like this isn't really well known yet, but I'm trying to get to a point where we can, and I'm also trying to step out now and share these stories, share these testimonies, share the message that this is real, that God can be met, heaven can be entered before death, and that these things, it's not a hypothetical, it's just the work you put into it is real work that will be rewarded, and there's ways and methods that people can use if they have that desire.
Thanks for that testimony, Eric. I really appreciate that. By the way, I saw that verse a while back too. It's a very interesting verse, isn't it? About great in the kingdom. Yeah. And there really is something about being a worker. And that really is, and there's many that are not, and there's a few that are. Jesus said, the harvest is great and the workers are few. And so this whole thing of working, and one of the good point about working, sharing the revelation and passing it along is part of being a worker. Giving testimony. I was talking with Jane about this a couple of days ago. I mean, like, why am I where I am and doing what I'm doing? And the answer, in part, is because as soon as I started getting revelation 40 years ago, I started teaching at that point. So I was always passing on what I'd seen.
In fact, you're doing it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
congratulations.
it's been my habit from the beginning to do that. I don't know why, I don't know. I guess I saw myself as a teacher at that point. I do see myself as much, much more than a teacher at this point, but there is an element of teaching even right now. But yeah, anybody else want to share?
I think we can get so caught up in, per se, working, in other words, thinking what we should be doing, as opposed to really understanding what God wants from us. And I've been in a situation this past year where I've really had to completely put myself aside and spend time with a daughter who has had severe trauma. And because of that, it's teaching me that in doing that and being there and present with her, that's what God is asking me to do. So even if it's just for a time, which it is obviously, I'm going to be obedient, and I'm going to enjoy it as well, even though it's hard. It's not so much, I think, Christians can tend to get caught up in numbers when it's right around you, right in front of you. And sometimes I think they miss that because they want the overall picture of, just saving someone. Well, that's important too. I'm not saying it's not, but there's a time when I think the Lord asks you to go deeper. And you are helping somebody, but at the same time, it's really teaching you something.
Sonia, what I'm hearing as you're talking, or sensing rather, is you are doing a mandate that was assigned to you. And there's a difference between an old expression, work smart, not hard. I think what you're saying is you can be very, very, I'm just seeing balance here. You can be very, very busy and getting nothing done.
Yes, exactly.
And much of the church is very, very busy and getting very little done that was actually assigned to them to do. And that is functioning by mandate, where the mandate is something you know that you've been given to do, and you do it out of your oneness and connection with the Godhead. When I first saw mandates, I saw mandates as being assigned to us, and we do them with a flow of Holy Spirit. They are living works and not dead works because of the presence of God in what you're doing. And I think that's, in a whole lot of words, that's what you just said, that you're doing right now. Yeah.
And I think what's really helped is we bought a horse, and she's a thoroughbred. And we've taken her she's still young. She's only 3 when we got her. And she's being broken in too. So all of this, my daughter rides. And so it's been incredible to see how this is all taking place. And just even the connection with the animals. It's just really amazing. I'm very grateful that I said yes to it.
I sense a lot of life in that. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, busyness for the sake of being busy is certainly, there's always a ditch on both sides of the road, and that's definitely the ditch on the one side of the road. The other side is, of course, doing nothing about anything. But the reality of the matter is we are always working at something. It's just to make it a living work and not a dead work. Any kingship testimonies of functioning in kingship?
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about New Year's Eve. That was a really nice gathering we had. Bill. Sonia, I think, both you and Jill.
Yes.
It was quite the night. It was great to move into that and be there and just experience everything that we did. Since doing that, going back and reading over just things of heaven, everything we saw and did there was, for those that weren't there, we actually got to go to New Jerusalem and were invited in. We saw the long banqueting table. And I've gone back on some of your writings and Jane's writings, and she describes it just like that. And, in the one part, there's the table that goes on. Then there are those other rooms where people are constantly doing different things. And we are now able to go back there, and do, I don't want to say business maybe, but just do our personal work there and go in and out of some of those other rooms there. So that's what I'm looking forward to since that time. There was a big expansion that night.
Mhm.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, I really sensed that the folks in that encounter had a very transitional experience, and there's going to be before and after that experience, and you're never going back to before. Yeah, discovery really does change you. And it does lead to functioning, but it does begin with discovery. I'm thinking of Jesus. John the Baptist has his disciples, and Jesus has two of John the Baptist's disciples come to him. This is John chapter 1. And they say, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" And Jesus says, "Come and see." And discovery is come and see. That's what it is. I mean, there's an invitation, come and see. And it does result in change, but it begins with coming and seeing. My desire is always for this. I am drawn to the discovery, but I'm having to make sure at this point that I actually spend some time discovering the functioning and start functioning in some of these areas that I've seen, and make sure that I haven't just seen but not function. The way I describe it is that it can become a Heavenly Realms bus tour. Look out the right window and you'll see. And I'm remembering my Christian school classroom, the day that I discovered that my students were seeing me as the lesson was the next day. They wanted a new lesson, but when I challenged them on the lesson from yesterday, they didn't know it. So they had a good time learning it, but they didn't retain it. And they were ready for the next installment of the TV show, Now, in their defense, in all fairness, a lot of the stuff that we get taught in school doesn't really particularly matter if you don't remember it. That's unfortunately the truth. Anyway, but you see what I'm saying. You don't get anywhere if you don't start with coming and seeing, but the purpose of coming and seeing is to get to someplace. And Friday night, folks in that encounter, I really believe your heart now is in New Jerusalem and not in other places.
Mhm.
And that is the beginning of dwelling and living there. If you're not already actually fully dwelling and living there, you certainly have a heart desire to come to a place of fully dwelling and living there. And that was life-changing, because there's a beginning and the end, and the end of the book is the beginning of a new beginning. And your heart is in the new beginning, fully there. I know it is. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Anybody else?
It's interesting. The next day after that encounter, I went to the store, not even looking for anything. Like, let me stop by the jewelry counter. And I fell in love with this ring that has a stone on it. It wasn't expensive. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm buying it for my New Jerusalem.
Wonderful.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
there is some physical stuff we do that reminds us
Mhm.
of. I'm hearing Ian Clayton with his chancellor's ring on his hand. When you talk about that,
Exactly.
you get your New Jerusalem ring on your hand. You're not going to forget that.
Mhm.
I mean, you moved in. Anybody else? Okay. I wanted to not just do discovery today. This was good, and this was very good all the way around. A lot of encouraging testimony, and I'm taking some of this for myself to, and I'm sure that everybody here has taken some, if not all, of what was said as for yourself, and people that are listening by recording will do the same. We've got a few minutes left. My most recent area of discovery has been with reference to the 7 days of creation. And my sense is that they are, let's back up a little bit. I see the revelation of Jesus Christ as a series of visions, all of which are meant to become encounters. So you step through the vision as a door into your own encounter, and then you become eventually. You begin that journey towards becoming. I had never applied the same principle, so that's the end of the book, right? I'd never applied the same principle to the beginning of the book. But I've been seeing these words in the revelation of Jesus Christ that all have their first appearance in Genesis 1. Heaven, earth, I mean, they're all there for the first time in Genesis 1. And so I've been looking at Genesis, the 7 days of creation, with especially looking at the first and the last, because of I am the first and the last, right? Beginning and the end, the Alpha, the Omega, which is actually probably the Aleph and the Tav. It's probably in Hebrew first. So the first day and the seventh day actually are the really, really key ones. But there's a journey in between. And I'm looking at the first day, and I just want to take us into encounter here for a little bit. First day, let there be light. And then we see that a day is evening and then morning, it's night and then day. Biblical day begins at sundown. So evening is the beginning of the day. A night of darkness. And in Genesis 1, darkness is defined. And the name darkness appears and then is there, and then that darkness is named night. And the name light appears, is written there, and then the light is called day. When something is called, it's given a name. And so the biblical pattern for a day begins with evening, followed by a night. Then there's a daybreak, some morning, and then there's a day. And that is the biblical pattern for a day. Now take that biblical pattern and turn it into a night watch. You put your head on the pillow at night and you engage the night watch, and the way you do this is by framing it up. And you, in my case, I ask a question. Then I sleep that night, and I wake up in the morning, and my experience is the revelation is there in the morning when I wake up. Night watch, okay? And so now let's take darkness and light, and I'll tell you, I told some folks this testimony. My first experience with this was climbing a mountain, coming to a man on the edge of a cave on that mountain, going into the cave, and it was dark. And at first I was I had a sense that, this might be evil, because that was my definition of darkness at that point. But then I realized that it wasn't evil, it was mystery, which is hidden truth, right? And so what is going on with the night and the day is revelation of mystery. Day one does tell us about physical creation to some extent, but primarily what it's there for is to bring us into functioning in night and day and revelation of mysteries, bringing that truth out of darkness into light. Scripture calls it dividing the light from the darkness, separating, taking the light out of the darkness, moving truth out of mystery into revelation.
Hi, I would just like to speak something here.
Please.
Because the scripture came to my mind like a few minutes ago, but now after listening to you, it's clearer. The scripture says there are 12 hours in a day, but if anyone walks in the dark, he stumbles. So, that's sort of define the 12-hour day, but the mystery of the darkness, the way we could put it is that, but if anyone walks outside of revelation truth, then he will stumble.
Yep. Beautiful, Doreen. Thank you. Here's another one. I have to paraphrase. This is Proverbs. It talks about walking in the light, and the light gets brighter and brighter until the full light of day. I'm just talking about your overall journey, coming out of darkness into light. But okay, so you come to a place of functioning where day one is something that you are. On a daily basis, you experience night and day, you experience mystery, then revelation on a daily basis. And then you come to a place, and I've heard Jane Johnson talking about this, I experienced this. She talks about infused knowledge. What's she doing? She's engaging darkness and light. She's engaging mystery and revelation, and she's taking that revelation out of the darkness and taking that truth out of darkness and bringing it into revelation, and she sees it, and I watch her doing it in the midst of an encounter. So it doesn't have to be done as part of the 24-hour daily cycle. It can be done in a moment. And I see this pattern with reference to time, that in New Jerusalem we function with reference to months. Think about there's a different fruit on the tree of life in New Jerusalem every month, right? We function with reference to 12. In Zion, we function with reference to days. Sons are born in a day in Zion. And in everlasting, we function with reference to an hour. And let me just show you how this works. No one knows the day or the hour of his coming, right? Except for the Father. That's what Jesus said. So things that happen have a year, a month, a day, an hour assigned to them. And I don't think necessarily he's speaking about, like 2025 on the 5th of December. He's talking about we come to a place where we function in months and days and hours. And when you get to where you're functioning in hours, that's where things start happening. You have the ability to make it happen right now. I'm speaking revelation here, and I don't have the full experience of this completely in all its aspects. But I see Revelation says speaking of the Lord, it says, who is, who was, and who is to come. Everything that's revealed there about the Godhead is revealed there about the Godhead for our purposes so that we can function in the same. We come to the place where we become who is, who was, and who is to come. I mean, and is to come goes from is to come to coming. You can make it come right now, you know, make it happen. This is the overall journey I see from through New Jerusalem to Zion to everlasting, is coming to this place of being able to manifest at will right now.
Um,
Go ahead.
okay, I was thinking as well. It says who was, who is, and who is to come, right?
Yeah.
Who was from the beginning, who is now, and yet, you know, who is to come, because it will be so much more revelation knowledge that we get to learn of him. So it will be things that we haven't yet seen or discovered. So to say that he is to come, in the form of revelation knowledge, that we will get to know more and more and more.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's like for the future and for the present.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a continual coming. And now here's the rest of the pattern. Adam's a son of God, right? Scripture says that. He falls, he's not functioning in son of God anymore. Jesus restores sonship to us. Adam and Eve are at a time before the fall where there still is darkness. I mean, it's not that they were created right there at that moment with all revelation of all things. They still had to function in revealing of mysteries. There was still darkness. But in New Jerusalem, there is no night. So at the beginning, there is still hidden mystery. They're created, but they haven't journeyed into all truth yet. And in New Jerusalem, we have availability of all truth and coming to a place when New Jerusalem descends, when the preparation time is completed, New Jerusalem descends to the earth, there is no night. All darkness has become light. All the light has been taken out of darkness. There's no darkness left. So there is this coming of revelation, a process, a journey from beginning to end. Even without the fall in there still is a process of bringing truth out of darkness into light. That is something that was built into the whole of creation from the beginning. It's not part of the fall. It's part of the creation.
You know, there's confirmed testimony of a lot of, especially apostles, that have made themselves available during the night and gone halfway around in the world to pray, and then be successful. And it was actually, you know, that apostle that had done that in the night. I've read many instances of those. We know our spirit and soul are supposed to be separate, so asking at night, you know, if the Lord needs that, you know, I would be of service. I would go. Because that night time has been some times where we've seen some miracles happen, and these people live their life that way. You know, like how Eric said, these things are really, they're just written in books now. People aren't really talking about them. Yep. But they're confirmed. They did happen. Yeah.
Yes. The thing about the night watch is your head is not in the way. You're not limiting yourself at all by your thinking during that period of time. You can get a lot done in the night watch. It's not wasted time. It's probably actually your most productive time. It's interesting, just realizing our whole modern lifestyle is designed to cut down the amount of time you spend in the night watch.
It's the opposite, isn't it? Yeah.
in the old, before all this technology and everything, I think pretty much when the sun went down, you went to bed. Or soon afterwards, because you know everything involved burning candle. It's expensive to try to continue to work. Actually, what I've read is there was a first sleep and a second sleep, and people woke up in the middle of the night and got some things done, and then went back to sleep again, especially in the winter. First sleep and second sleep was normal in the medieval times. Completely alien to our current lifestyle. But okay, I'm going to turn the recording off now.